Human helped an alien girl escape a collapsing bridge. Her quiet confession came hours later. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The storm hit the ridge like a living thing, hurling sheets of rain sideways and rattling the steel suspension cables of the old service bridge. Ethan Cole tightened his grip on the handrail as the wind shoved at him, the metal under his boots trembling just enough to raise the hair on the back of his neck. His maintenance scanner beeped a warning, a pulsing red icon flashing, structural instability detected. He muttered under his breath, wiped the rain from his lashes, and stepped farther onto the bridge. The roar of water far below drowned out everything else. Lightning flickered above the canyon, briefly illuminating a slim figure halfway across. Someone stranded where no one should be during a storm like this. Ethan's pulse jumped. The silhouette was small, unsteady, her posture tense against the gusts. As he pushed forward, his flashlight beam caught pale blue skin, a soft luminescent sheen reflecting the storm light. An alien girl, young, maybe his age, clutched the twisted railing as if afraid to move. Her silver eyes widened when she saw him. "You shouldn't be here," she called, her voice thin against the wind. The bridge, a deep groan rolled through the steel beneath them. Ethan felt the vibration in his bones. "Yeah, I noticed," he answered, forcing his voice calm. "I'm here to get you off it." She shook her head, rain streaming down her cheeks like streaks of glass. "I'm stuck." The floor plate shifted. It trapped my foot. Another flash of lightning revealed exactly that. A warped metal grate had pinned her boot, the edge curled downward from earlier stress. Ethan dropped to one knee beside her, tools already in hand. The bridge shuddered again, cables whining overhead. She flinched at the sound, gripping the railing tighter. Up close, her trembling was more visible, though she tried to hide it. Behind a steady expression, "Hold still," Ethan said, bracing himself as he worked the pry clamp under the bent metal. "I'll get you out." "Why would a human come back for me?" she whispered, barely audible through the storm. Anyone else would have run. Ethan didn't look up. He just pressed harder on the clamp, metal groaning as it resisted. "I don't run from people who need help," he said simply. The plate finally gave with a sharp pop, releasing her foot. She stumbled forward, and Ethan caught her arm to steady her. Her skin felt warm despite the cold rain. For a heartbeat, she looked at him with something fragile flickering across her features. Surprise, relief, maybe something deeper. But then the bridge lurched, a violent jolt that nearly knocked them both off their feet. Ethan pulled her close, guiding her toward the support tower where solid ground waited. "Come on," he said, keeping his voice level. "We've got you." She nodded, leaning into him as the storm howled around them, her steps shaky but determined as they pushed through the collapsing world of steel and rain. The storm eased only slightly as Ethan guided the alien girl toward the maintenance shelter built into the canyon wall, a narrow steel door barely visible through the sheets of rain. The bridge behind them groaned again, a tired structure surrendering piece by piece to the storm, but Ethan did not look back. He kept one steadying hand near her elbow, ready to catch her if the slick metal walkway pitched beneath them. Her steps were uneven at first, the earlier shock still lingering in her posture, but she stayed close, her silver eyes lifting now and then to make sure he was still beside her. The shelter door hissed open when he swiped his access card, releasing a faint warmth into the cold air. Inside, the dim yellow lighting flickered across concrete walls, tool racks, and a humming backup generator. The girl paused just past the threshold, water dripping from her hair and clothes, her expression unreadable. Ethan reached for a thermal blanket from the emergency kit and offered it to her. She hesitated before accepting it, as though the simple act of kindness required a moment to translate across whatever cultural boundaries separated them. When she wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, a soft glow shimmered briefly beneath the fabric, the bioluminescent tint of her skin responding to the sudden warmth. Ethan tried not to stare. Instead, he set his gear down and tapped his handheld scanner, reviewing the structural readings it had captured earlier. The numbers were worse than he expected. "The bridge will not last another hour," he said quietly. "It was a close call for both of us." She lowered herself carefully onto the bench against the wall, her hands folded in her lap. "I did not realize the structure was unstable," she murmured. "I thought the storm would pass, and I wanted to cross before the river rose. That was foolish." Her voice was calm, but something fragile threaded through it. Ethan sat across from her, leaning his elbows on his knees. "You made a judgment call. It happens. What matters is that you are safe now." Her eyes lifted toward him, luminous and steady. "You risked a great deal to come back for me." Ethan shrugged lightly. "I had the tools. I was already on the bridge. It made sense to help." She studied him for a long, silent moment, as though weighing those words carefully. "Among my people," she said softly, "help is not given so easily. Assistance is reserved for those who have earned it or for those of shared lineage. I am neither to you." The generator hummed, filling the space between them. Ethan kept his gaze gentle. "You do not have to earn being treated like a person in danger." She seemed to absorb that slowly, her fingers tightening around the blanket. Rain pattered against the metal roof, softer now. The long echo of the canyon wind faded into something almost peaceful. After a breath, she said, "My name is Lyrian, but you may call me Lyra. That is the name I offer to those I trust." Ethan felt the weight of that, quiet but meaningful. "I am Ethan," he replied. "Just Ethan. No titles. No special lineage." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, subtle enough to miss if he had blinked. "Then, Ethan, thank you." She glanced toward the door, where the dim storm light flickered. "When the bridge began to shift, I thought it was the end. I remember thinking that no one would even know. But you turned back." Ethan looked down at his hands, rain still drying on his sleeves. Someone needed help. That was enough. Her gaze remained on him, soft and almost searching, as though she was studying something she had never seen before. Hours still remained before rescue crews could arrive, but the fear that had filled the shelter moments earlier slowly unwound. Lyra's posture eased, her breathing leveled, and her eyes lowered gently as though allowing herself, at last, to rest. The maintenance shelter settled into a softer quiet as the storm's intensity faded, leaving only the steady patter of rain on metal and the low hum of the generator. Ethan adjusted the thermostat on the wall, nudging a bit more warmth into the narrow room. Lyra watched him with a calm focus, her silver eyes reflecting the amber light that flickered overhead. The glow beneath her skin shifted subtly, settling into a gentler hue, as though her body had finally begun to believe it was safe. Ethan sat back on the bench across from her, stretching his tired shoulders. The adrenaline had begun to wear off, leaving a dull ache in his muscles and a faint chill behind his ribs. Lyra noticed. "You are cold," she said softly. "I can hear it in your breathing." Ethan chuckled lightly. "I am fine. The storm just took a lot out of me." She tilted her head, the blanket slipping slightly before she adjusted it. "Humans get tired quickly, but you do not hide it poorly. You hide it well." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "It is nothing worth worrying about." She seemed to consider that, then lowered her gaze to her hands. "Where I come from, hiding discomfort is a requirement. Showing it is considered a sign of weakness, and weakness invites judgment." He leaned forward slightly. "Sounds difficult to live that way." "It is normal to us," she replied, though her tone wavered. "But today felt different." There was a pause, the kind that settled naturally when two people grew more comfortable sharing the same air. The rain lightened outside, becoming a distant shimmer rather than a threat. Ethan glanced at the scanner again. Rescue teams should reach the ridge soon. "The roads are still flooded, but they will get here before dark." Lyra nodded, though something in her posture suggested she was in no rush to leave. "Ethan," she said gently, "may I ask you a question?" "Of course." "When you saw me trapped, did you hesitate? Even for a moment?" The question was not sharp, not accusatory. It was searching, almost vulnerable. Ethan shook his head. "No, I only thought about getting you free." Lyra absorbed that in silence. After a moment she said, "Among my people, choices are measured by benefit. If there is no gain, there is no action." I believed that was universal. Her eyes lifted to meet his. "But you moved because someone needed help. That reason stands on its own for you." "It does," Ethan replied. "It always has." She looked at him as though seeing him for the first time, truly seeing him. The faint luminescent sheen along her cheek brightened a little, not in alarm, but in something closer to warmth. I felt the bridge slipping, she whispered. I accepted it. I thought no one would reach me in time. And then I heard you call out. Ethan's expression softened. I was not going to let you face that alone. Lyra took a slow breath, her hands unclasping as she let them rest openly on her lap. It is strange, she murmured. I have lived among humans for months. Yet today was the first moment I understood why people speak of your kind with such contradiction. Undefinable, unpredictable, capable of both caution and extraordinary compassion. The generator flickered once, casting shadows that stretched and softened across the walls. Lyra's voice dropped to a quiet, almost hesitant register. I feel as if I saw something in you I was not meant to witness, something rare. Ethan smiled faintly. It was not anything special. To you, perhaps, she said. To me, it changed something. Her gaze drifted toward the door where the storm had once raged. The moment I thought I was alone on that bridge, I was wrong. The rain eased to a soft whisper, and for the first time since the storm began, the canyon felt still. The air inside the shelter warmed little by little, enough that the faint shivers in Lyra's shoulders eased. Ethan checked the power gauge on the generator, tapping the glass lightly with his knuckle. It still had several hours of charge left. Good. They would be fine until the rescue team arrived. Outside, the storm clouds had begun to break apart, letting thin ribbons of late afternoon light slip through. The glow filtered in through the narrow window near the ceiling, casting soft gold across the room and brushing the edges of Lyra's features. For a moment, Ethan simply watched her study the light, as if she were memorizing it. She noticed his gaze and then looked down at her hands, her posture shifting with a subtle self-consciousness that had not been there earlier. Ethan, she said quietly, may I ask something else? He nodded. Go ahead. Would you have come for me? She asked. If I had been a stranger of your own kind instead? A human? Ethan blinked, surprised by the question. Of course, he answered without hesitation. Why? Her silver eyes lifted, shimmering faintly. Because today made me realize something about myself. I was raised to believe that value is earned. That trust is selective. That care is transactional. Yet you offered help without expecting anything in return. Not information. Not allegiance. Nothing. Ethan rubbed at a scuff on his boot, letting her words settle. Maybe your people measure worth differently, he said. But out here, on a broken bridge in the middle of nowhere, none of that matters. You were in danger. That was enough. Lyra absorbed this in silence, her expression shifting into something thoughtful, almost tender. When I first arrived on Earth, she murmured, I thought humans were difficult to understand. Emotional. Disorganized. Impossible to predict. Ethan laughed softly. That sounds about right. And yet, she continued, her voice steady but soft, there is a clarity in you that I did not expect. You do not hide your motives. You do not shield your intentions behind layers of custom. It is refreshing. Ethan leaned back against the cool wall, letting his shoulders relax. I think most people are just trying to do the right thing, he said, even if they do not always get it right. Lyra lowered her gaze again. You speak as if it is simple. It can be, Ethan replied. Not always. But sometimes yes. The quiet stretched, but it no longer felt heavy. Instead, it held a kind of calm that neither of them seemed eager to break. A soft beeping sounded from the console near the door. Ethan stood and checked the incoming transmission. Rescue team is about 20 minutes out, he said. They made it through the lower pass. Lyra nodded, but something in her eyes dimmed slightly, as though she was bracing herself for the moment the shelter would no longer belong. Only to the two of them. She shifted the blanket around her shoulders. Ethan, she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. I know this was not part of your day. You were working. You had responsibilities. You did not owe me anything. He shook his head gently. Nobody owes anyone kindness. That is what makes it matter. Lyra exhaled softly, and the glow under her skin brightened, just a touch. In my culture, she said, when someone alters the course of your life, you are expected to mark that moment. To acknowledge it. Ethan smiled. How do you do that? She looked up, meeting his eyes with a quiet steadiness that stilled the room. By remembering the person who showed you something new. The last traces of the storm faded outside, leaving only the distant rush of the swollen river and the hum of the generator. The world felt suspended for a breath, as if listening to the unspoken shift between them. The rescue signal repeated in steady intervals, a soft chime that bounced off the metal walls, but neither Ethan nor Lyra moved right away. The shelter felt suspended in a rare kind of quiet, the kind that made every small sound carry more meaning than it should. Lyra adjusted the blanket around her shoulders again, her movements slow and deliberate, as if grounding herself in the warmth it offered. Her silver eyes flicked toward the narrow window where the sky had begun to open into streaks of pale blue behind the thinning clouds. "Your world has strange storms," she said softly. Ethan smiled faintly. "They're not usually that intense. You just happened to pick a dramatic day to cross a bridge." Lyra huffed out a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. "I did not choose it well." Ethan leaned back against the wall, stretching his legs out carefully. "You handled it better than most would have. I have seen trained technicians freeze when structures start shifting under them." Lyra looked at him with an unreadable expression. "I froze too." "Not really," Ethan replied. "You stayed alert. You listened. And you trusted me enough to move when you needed to." She absorbed that, her glow shifting faintly under her skin. "Trust," she repeated softly, as if the word deserved its own examination. "We define that differently where I come from. It is usually tied to obligation, contract, expectation." Ethan shrugged lightly. "Here, trust often happens in the moments you do not plan for." She considered this, then looked away, her gaze drawn again to the window. A soft rumble from the valley indicated that the river below still ran swollen with storm water. "Ethan," she said quietly, "when the rescue team arrives, what happens then?" He blinked, not expecting the question. "They will take us to the main station. They will check you for injuries. After that, you can go wherever you were headed before the storm." Lyra nodded, but the gesture was slow, almost reluctant. "I see." Ethan tilted his head. "Is that not what you want?" Lyra took a moment before answering. "I am not sure," she admitted. "Before the bridge, my path felt clear. I was traveling for research, gathering environmental samples across your region. It was routine, predictable. But now," she paused, choosing her words with care. "Now I feel as though my understanding of this world shifted." "You shifted it." Ethan felt a small warmth rise in his chest, surprised by her honesty. "I did not mean to change anything for you. Sometimes change happens without intention," she replied. "Sometimes it is simply the result of a moment." The rescue team chimed again through the console, this time announcing they were 15 minutes away. Lyra's fingers tightened around the blanket, then loosened slowly. "Ethan," she said, her voice gentle, "may I ask one more question before they arrive?" "Of course," he answered. "If our positions had been reversed, if you had been the one trapped, would you have wanted someone to return for you?" Ethan considered the question more deeply than he expected. The room seemed to quiet further, as though waiting for his answer. "Yes," he said finally. "Not because I expect it, but because it would mean the world is better than we think it is." Lyra's eyes softened, the glow beneath her skin warming into a gentle radiance. "Then I am glad," she murmured, "that today proved it is." The distant hum of approaching engines echoed faintly through the canyon, but inside the shelter, time seemed to slow, wrapping the two of them in a calm that neither spoke into words. The low thrum of approaching engines grew clearer, vibrating faintly through the shelter floor. Dust trembled on the metal seams as the rescue craft maneuvered closer to the ridge. Lyra's gaze shifted toward the door, but she did not rise. Something held her in place, as if stepping outside would break whatever fragile truth had settled between them. Ethan checked the status screen again, though he already knew what it would say. 10 minutes out. Wind speed declining. Conditions stable. All the practical details that mattered for his job, yet none of them explained the weight in the air. Lyra drew the blanket a little tighter, then let her shoulders relax as though giving herself permission to ease out of formality. "Ethan," she said softly, "in my culture, gratitude is spoken publicly, not privately. It is declared before witnesses, not shared in small rooms." Her voice lowered. "But today's events, they do not fit our rituals. They do not fit anything I have known." Ethan leaned back on his palms, stretching his legs in front of him. "You do not have to explain anything. You went through something frightening. Anyone would need time to process that. It is not only fear, she murmured. Her eyes lifted to meet his, steady and unguarded. It is realization. He held her gaze, waiting. She took a slow breath. When the bridge started to collapse, I understood how fragile life can be. But when you came back for me, I began to understand something else. Something about connection. About instinct. Her fingers brushed the edge of the blanket, tracing the fabric absently. I have studied humans for months. Their customs, their language, their unpredictable decisions. But nothing has taught me as much as today taught me. Ethan managed a gentle smile. I am not a great example of humanity. You are, she corrected, her tone firm in its softness. You did not pause to calculate benefit. You did not hesitate because we are different species. You responded to need. The hum of the engines grew louder. 7 minutes out. Lyra glanced at the readout, then back at Ethan. Among my people, such decisions are seen as inefficient. Yet I saw efficiency in it. Not the kind measured in data, but the kind measured in impact. Ethan blinked, a little surprised. Impact? Yes, she said. Your action changed the direction of my day, my safety, and perhaps even my belief about this world. She hesitated, then added quietly, I did not expect one moment to alter so much. Ethan pushed a loose strand of hair from his forehead. I think moments do that sometimes. Especially the ones that scare us a little. Lyra exhaled, her glow softening into a warm hue. The moment scared me, she admitted. But not because of the danger. The danger was simple to understand. It was your decision that frightened me more. Ethan frowned gently. Why? Because, she whispered, it made me question what I believed about myself. And about you. The engines now filled the air, dust shaking loose from the ceiling as the rescue craft settled into hover position outside. Lights flashed in muted pulses through the narrow window. Lyra stood slowly, steadying herself with the wall. Ethan rose as well, but neither moved toward the exit. The world outside waited, busy and practical, ready to pull them back into separate paths. Inside the shelter, a small silence lingered, delicate and meaningful. Lyra looked at him one last time before the door release clicked. Ethan, she said, her voice calm and quiet. Your presence today did more than save my life. It changed how I see it. The door slid open, letting in the bright wash of rescue lights. But for a breath, neither of them stepped through. The rescue lights washed through the doorway in soft pulses, painting the shelter in alternating hues of white and amber. Lyra stood motionless for a breath, her silhouette outlined against the brightness, as if the outside world had arrived too quickly and she was not quite ready to meet it. Ethan stepped beside her, the warm draft from the rescue craft brushing past both of them. He could hear the muffled voices of the crew preparing equipment, radios clicking as they coordinated the pickup. Yet inside the shelter, the air felt suspended, the weight of unspoken thoughts holding the moment still. Lyra's fingers tightened slightly on the blanket before she released it, letting it fall neatly over her arm. She took a single step toward the exit, then paused and looked back at Ethan. Your people will have questions, she murmured. About what happened. About why I was on the bridge. Then we answer them, Ethan said gently. Together, if you want. The faint glow beneath her skin flickered at that word. Together. She held his gaze for a second longer before exiting the shelter. Outside, the evening light stretched across the ridge in long, pale beams. The storm clouds had finally pulled apart, leaving the sky washed in soft blues and faint traces of gold. The bridge lay in the distance, sagging in places, but still standing just enough for the rescue team to understand why the call had been urgent. As Ethan stepped out after her, a medic approached with a scanner. Are either of you hurt? The medic asked. Just shaken, Ethan replied. She was pinned on the bridge, but no major injuries. Lyra glanced at him with quiet gratitude, as though relieved he did not embellish or try to speak for her. The medic nodded and stepped aside to let them board the craft. Inside, the temperature was warm and steady. Seats lined the cabin, each fitted with safety harnesses and diagnostic panels. Lyra settled into the nearest one with careful grace, still taking in her surroundings. Ethan sat across from her, and the hum of the engines rose as the rescue crew prepared for liftoff. As the doors closed, sealing them into the quiet chamber, Lyra shifted slightly. Ethan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There is something I did not say earlier. He waited, sensing the shift in her tone. When the bridge began to fail, she continued, I understood logically that I might not survive. But logic was not the strongest feeling I had. Her hands folded neatly in her lap. It was regret. Ethan straightened a little. Regret about what? Lyra looked out the window for a moment, watching the last rays of daylight skim across the canyon. Regret that I had not learned enough. Regret that I had not experienced enough. Regret that I had not allowed myself to understand humans beyond what my research required. She turned her gaze back to him, her expression calm but open, stripped of all the guarded formality she usually carried. And regret, she said softly, that I had never spoken to someone the way I spoke to you today. The engines vibrated beneath their feet as the craft lifted into the air, steady and smooth. Ethan felt the moment settle between them like a soft echo, not demanding an answer, only acknowledgement. Lyra held his gaze. I realized something while we waited in that shelter, she continued. Something I have not allowed myself to accept before. Ethan waited, the world narrowing to the quiet glow of her eyes. Connection, she said, is not weakness. It is not inefficiency. It is a form of truth. And today you showed me that truth. The craft ascended higher, leaving the fractured bridge and storm-soaked canyon behind. But inside the cabin, the quiet remained, warm, steady, and filled with a meaning neither of them rushed to define. The rescue craft leveled out as it cleared the ridge, the turbulence fading into a smooth, gentle glide. Evening light filtered through the cabin windows in soft amber streaks, brushing along the metallic panels and settling across Lyra's features. Her silver eyes reflected the shifting colors of the sky, calm, yet carrying something deeper, something that had been taking shape ever since the moment Ethan reached her on the bridge. She sat with her hands clasped lightly in her lap, her posture composed but not distant. Ethan watched her for a moment, noting how the glow beneath her skin had softened into a gentle, steady radiance. It reminded him of bioluminescent algae drifting under still water, faint but alive. A soft chime sounded as the craft transmitted their status to the regional station. The pilot leaned back from the cockpit. We will arrive in about 20 minutes, he announced. If either of you needs medical attention, the scanners are online. Lyra nodded politely, then returned her attention to Ethan as the pilot refocused on his controls. For a few breaths, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was no longer heavy, no longer the residue of fear or exhaustion. It was reflective, almost peaceful, like the quiet hum after a storm finishes remaking the landscape. Finally, Lyra tilted her head slightly. Ethan, she said, there is something you should know. Something I did not mention earlier because I was not sure how to say it. Ethan shifted, attentive. I am listening. She drew in a slow breath, the movement subtle but deliberate. My journey across this region was not only for research. It was also for evaluation. My superiors want to understand how humans respond to crisis, how they act when systems fail, how they treat those outside their own species. They believe humans are unpredictable, and unpredictability is seen as a risk. Ethan blinked. So you were observing us? In a sense, she said softly. But today was not part of any plan. I was not supposed to be on that bridge. I was not supposed to be vulnerable. Her gaze met his with a quiet intensity. And I was not supposed to witness what you did. Ethan shifted slightly, unsure what to say. I did what anyone should do. But not everyone would, she replied gently. Some would choose safety. Some would hesitate. Some would decide the risk was too high. But you moved without calculation. Her voice grew softer. And that is what my people fear. They do not know how to measure that kind of instinct. Ethan folded his hands, listening closely. Lyra continued. When I return, they will ask for my report. They will expect analysis. Data. They will want to know if humanity's unpredictability is dangerous. She paused, her expression easing into something warmer. And I will tell them this. Unpredictability can also be compassion. It can be instinctive kindness. It can be the reason a life is saved. The engines hummed softly beneath their feet, a low, steady pulse. Ethan felt something shift in the cabin, not physically, but in the quiet understanding between them. Lyra looked toward the window briefly, watching the horizon stretch out in soft layers of color. I was afraid, she admitted, not because the bridge was failing, but because I realized my report will not be what they expect. Ethan raised an eyebrow. What will you tell them? Lyra's gaze returned to him, steady and calm. That humanity is not defined by logic alone. It is defined by choice. And today, your choice saved more than my life. The craft continued its smooth approach toward the station, but inside the cabin, time seemed to pause, gently holding the truth of her words between them. The station lights appeared ahead, a cluster of warm glows rising from the valley floor as the rescue craft descended through the last stretch of open sky. The engines softened into a gentle hum, steady and familiar, yet the air inside the cabin held a quiet tension, as if both Ethan and Lyra sensed the approaching moment when the world would step back in and gently separate their paths. Lyra's gaze remained fixed on the window, but not in the way she had studied landscapes earlier. Now her expression was distant, thoughtful, as though she were preparing herself for something heavier than a debriefing. Ethan watched her in the soft cabin light, the bioluminescent shimmer along her cheek dimming into a faint breath of color. She folded her hands neatly, a gesture he had come to recognize as her way of steadying herself before speaking. When we land, she said quietly, protocol will require that I submit a statement. It will be reviewed by my superiors. They will dissect every detail. Ethan nodded. I figured as much. They will also ask about you, she continued, her tone calm but edged with something fragile. They will want to know why a human acted without hesitation. They will want to know why your instincts opposed their expectations. Ethan leaned forward slightly. Tell them the truth. Lyra's eyes softened. I intend to. But the truth is not simple. It is not a single sentence. Silence settled again, but it was the kind that wrapped rather than pressed. The craft dipped lower, the station platform expanding beneath them. The lights along the landing pad blinked in steady rhythm, guiding the craft into position. As the engines shifted into their final descent cycle, Lyra spoke once more. Ethan, she whispered, there is something I did not say in the shelter. Something I meant to say, but fear made me quiet. Ethan's breath slowed. You can say it now. Lyra turned toward him fully, the soft glow of the overhead lamp catching the silver of her eyes. When you reached for me on that bridge, she said, I felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, not confusion. It was recognition, as if some part of me knew you before I understood why. Ethan felt his chest tighten in a way he did not expect. Lyra continued, her voice steady but quiet. My people believe that connection is born from shared lineage or predetermined purpose. Today disproved that for me. What I felt was not predetermined. It was chosen in a single moment, when you turned back. The landing gear touched the platform with a soft tremor. The pilot announced their arrival, but the words faded into the background, lost beneath the sound of Lyra's gentle confession. She glanced toward the closing daylight outside, then back at Ethan. I do not know what my report will change, she admitted, but I know what today changed in me. Ethan swallowed, his voice low. What did it change? Lyra's answer came in a whisper, fragile and certain all at once. It taught me that humanity is not defined by species. It is defined by the choice to care when nothing demands it. And because of that, I will remember you. The cabin lights dimmed as the doors unlocked with a soft click. The world waited outside, ready to take them in separate directions, but Lyra lingered one breath longer. She placed her hand gently over Ethan's, her touch light, warm and steady. In her eyes, the reflection of the station lights shimmered like distant stars. Whatever path I take next, she murmured, it carries the memory of the human who ran toward me when the world was falling. Then she stepped back as the doors opened fully, letting the quiet meaning of her words settle between them with the same delicate weight as starlight on still water.